All right, we're joined with John Urquhart, who's running for re-election to sheriff. So let's start with a 2-minute introduction.
I'm John Urquhart, running for sheriff again. It was a special election last year to fill out the rest of Sue Rahr's term, a 1-year term. So now I'm up again this year for a full 4-year term, so back-to-back elections. Last year I talked a lot about leadership, accountability, and transparency, so I'm not really going to go through that again. We've all heard that, got me elected. This year, or this time, I'll talk just a little bit about what I've done in the 151 days or so that I've been the sheriff. I made a lot of changes when I came in that are kind of inside baseball, peculiar to the sheriff's office. I don't really need to talk about that too much. But some of the other things I've done, one of the first things I did when I got to the sheriff's office within the first couple of days is I confirmed that we actually had a drone. And then I grounded the drone. I said, no, we're not going to be flying that thing. And shortly thereafter, I gave it back. Not because it isn't a good piece of police equipment that we could use. I prefer to call it an aerial camera rather than a drone. And I think someday we will have them. Police departments will have them. But it's not something that the public is ready for right now. I think there needs to be restrictions on their use. We went down and testified in Olympia in front of the committee to suggest a search warrant would be appropriate before we use drones, as long as we can use them in emergency situations. One of the first things I did. Next thing I did is I solidified our rather ad hoc U visa policy that we had, where immigrants, undocumented immigrants that are victims of crimes and cooperate with the police can get a visa from the federal government. That was kind of spread all over the sheriff's office. It wasn't the way it should be done, and now we've made sure that we have a good process online. I review every single application and I sign them. I started the LEAD program. I piggybacked on the LEAD program that Seattle has, where we take people that we've arrested on very minor drug crimes, and rather than take them to jail, we get them into treatment. We partner with Evergreen Treatment Services, so there is an alternative to jail for low-level drug users. That's up at Skyway right now, and I hope to get it into White Center very shortly, and my time is up.
Great. Now we have 5 prepared questions, 2-minute answers to each of these, and we left off. Liz, you want to start with number 1 for sheriff?
Sure. In the past 14 months, King County has transitioned between 3 sheriff administrations. How has the work of the sheriff's office changed during that time?
Actually, it was 3 sheriffs in 10 months. In a period of 10 months, we had 3 different sheriffs in the sheriff's office. There's a lot of things that went on between the time when Sue Rahr was the sheriff, and then going into Steve Strand, who was the sheriff, and of course when I came in. I think one of the biggest things was the 2 audits that were done about this time last year. One was the Merrick Bob audit in September, the other was Hillard Hines, which is a company out of Chicago that was done earlier in the year. And the Hillard Hines audit in particular talked about there was not a culture of accountability inside the sheriff's office. And that just didn't happen overnight. I think it was an evolution. And that was one of the main things I wanted to change, is restore that culture. Police departments especially are all about culture. I wanted to change that culture back into one of accountability, and the main way to do that is through leadership. The leadership starts at the top. It's a cliche, yes, but it does start at the top. I set the tone for the sheriff's office, and that's what I'm doing. And the other thing I did was to change a lot of the processes that we use, including how we review use of force. And we're just about ready to, actually we did on Thursday, roll out our new use of force procedure, what we call categorical uses of force, which are very, very serious, either officer-involved shootings or incidents where a suspect is seriously injured. How we review those. And we've got a 2-pronged process that we're going to use. It's not only essentially the criminal review, if you will, but the administrative review. This is state-of-the-art. In fact, the prosecutor's office, Mark Larson, the chief criminal deputy, calls it the gold standard of reviewing use of force. That's the biggest change that's gone on in the last 14 months, if you will.
Number 2, sir. Looking forward, what are your priorities for the next 4 years?
When I came into the sheriff's office, I had 4 priorities that are going to take a while. It's not going to all be done in the first year. The first one is get rid of the program we had for deploying deputies in unincorporated King County. And essentially that was a way of putting deputies out in the field where they had no roll calls. They had virtually no interaction with our sergeant whatsoever. They worked out of their cars all the time, never came to a precinct unless they had to turn in evidence, essentially. And at the same time, we were sliding them all over the county to fill in slots. So when you came to work, a deputy wouldn't know if he was working in northeast King County up by Woodinville or if he was working down by Enumclaw until he came to work. That goes against every part of training through community policing that there ever was. You can't do that. That was the first thing I changed, and that we go back to a precinct model with roll calls day after tomorrow, as a matter of fact. Second thing was I wanted to get reaccredited by CALEA. That's the standard for police agencies across the country that says that we have the right processes in place. The third thing I wanted to do was revise our use of force issues that we're doing now that I talked about just a few minutes ago. So what was the fourth one? I can't remember the fourth one. And the fourth priority, I can't remember what it was now. Those are my four main priorities when I came into the sheriff's office, along with the culture of policing, the culture of accountability, that sort of thing. But that's going to carry on. That'll carry on through the next 4 years after this election.
Sarah, for 3.
How is the sheriff's office currently handling the new legal status of marijuana? And how is it planning for the upcoming commercial sale of the product?
A lot of it's out of our hands, quite frankly. You know, the commercial sale is going to be run by zoning and primarily by the Liquor Control Board. As you know, I was a strong proponent of Initiative 502. I'm a former narcotics detective. I know that the war on drugs didn't work. It's not going to work the way it's ever done. All we did is put a lot of people in jail, and mostly people of color. This was the time, this was the year to change that. It's going to be real interesting what the federal government does now. My guess is, I was a betting man, I think they'll keep their hands off Washington, Colorado. I don't expect we're going to have a problem with that. Now the question becomes, what's the sheriff's office going to do? There's a couple of areas. First of all, hiring. And I've changed our hiring processes so that we will hire people that have used marijuana. It used to be 3 years, I've changed it to 1 year. So if you use marijuana longer than 1 year ago, we will still hire you. It used to be more than 3 years ago. In the state of Washington, it's legal. It's not legal federally, so we have to be a little bit careful there. Second issue is, what do we do when we come across somebody that has marijuana and we book them into jail? Because the jail won't take the marijuana, legal amounts, we take it, put it into for safekeeping. And there's an argument that can be made, or has been made to me, well, we're not going to return that because it's against federal law. And I'm saying, no, we are going to return that. We are going to return that just like we would any other property that we take into jail that's legal to own. Just because it's illegal under federal law, I don't think we should keep it. Those are probably the two main areas I think that we are going to be faced with 502. Again, it's a culture thing. Our deputies have to understand, that comes from me, that this is now a legal substance. What we've been doing for the last 40 years, as of November 6th, has changed. And it's changed dramatically. We have to get used to that.
Play number 4.
In what ways can the sheriff's office utilize new technology to increase efficiency and improve law enforcement?
You know, new technology is a two-edged sword. And you don't have to look any farther than the cameras out at Alki that people are complaining about to look at that technology. Cameras, probably the biggest game changer, I think, for police work, because we can solve crimes. Arguably, you can prevent crimes. I'm not sure that's true, but certainly you can solve crimes with surveillance cameras. Are the people ready for them yet? Doesn't sound like they're ready for them out at Alki. Those were put up because of fears of terrorism at the port. The same cameras that would have been used in Boston if they'd had them. Those weren't public cameras, those weren't government cameras that caught those 2 bombers. They were private surveillance cameras, not run by the government at all. That's probably the biggest issue. But is the public ready for cameras? There are tens of thousands of cameras in Britain, clearly 250,000 or something like that in London alone. Clearly they've accepted them, run by the government. I'm not sure they're ready to accept them here or not. The other thing is databases. What we can do with computers now is growing exponentially. I'm working on a program called Radar. It's in the paper on the front page of the Times Sunday before last. It's a way where patrol officers can interact with people that have mental issues or drug issues before it becomes a crisis, before we end up having to shoot them or suicide by cop. If they get to know us, if they get to know who we are, we have a much better chance of working through them. But it needs to be not just the officer on duty that particular shift. That information has to be available to deputies on all 3 shifts. But to do that, you have to have a database of people with mental issues or drug issues that haven't been convicted of a crime. Is the public ready for that? I'm not sure. It will save lives, but I'm not sure the public's ready for it yet.
Item number 5.
In 2010, the domestic violence unit was disbanded. What steps are being taken to restore this unit?
One of the things I ran on was restoring the domestic violence unit. The domestic violence unit is really specialized detectives that have the training, that have the experience, that have the time to investigate. For the most part, they're misdemeanor crimes, but they are exceedingly important crimes. Suspect that's been convicted, or the suspect in a domestic violence incident, is more likely to go on and commit additional crimes, including homicide, more likely than any other suspect in any other crime. They're really, really important crimes. If you have dedicated detectives that can do that investigation, we're much more likely to get a conviction, and especially a conviction where the victim recants or refuses to testify. You look at the Cafe Racer shooting that we had, 5 people dead. That person had 2 arrests for domestic violence, one against his girlfriend and one against his brother. But in both cases, the prosecution didn't go forward because of the victim didn't want to cooperate with the case. But under state law, if he had been convicted, under federal law, he would not have been allowed to possess any firearms. So that means the family, who really knew this guy shouldn't have any guns and had nobody to turn to. They could have turned to the police, we could have taken those guns away. As it was, we couldn't. So what I'm doing is I want to reinstate that unit, but I need funding from the county council to do that. For the 2014 budget, for my next budget, I will be asking specifically for money to reinstate the domestic violence unit, have dedicated domestic violence detectives to do that kind of work. They can get the 911 tapes, they'll have time to get the medical history, they'll be able to time to work with the victim and convince the victim to cooperate with our prosecution. All those things that need to be done because it is such a specialized crime and such an important crime, even though usually it's a misdemeanor.
Great, so now we'll open it up to follow-up questions. These are 1-minute answers. So, any questions for Sheriff Urquhart?
I know we have an initiative pushing forward for with gun violence. Where are you standing on gun reforms in Washington State?
Gun control?
Gun control.
Who wants to say that word? I think that violence in America, gun violence in America in particular, can't be reduced to the discussion can't be reduced to a bumper sticker. And that's what everybody tries to do. People on one side call it ceasefire Washington. People on the other side, the NRA, all they want to do is reduce it to a bumper sticker. And you cannot do that. It is such a complicated problem. And when you talk about getting rid of high-capacity magazines, or when you talk about outlawing assault weapons, all you do is polarize the conversation. I'm against doing that. I think there are things that can be done. First of all, we need to change federal law so the CDC can investigate, can look into, can investigate the effects of gun violence. Right now, they can't do that. They blocked a permanent ATF director. I think that's a mistake. We need a director of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms that's permanent. I think that the state of Washington, the entire country, but let's start with the state of Washington, needs universal background checks on everybody, including your brother-in-law. If you sell a gun in your garage to your brother-in-law, you do a background check to make sure he's not a domestic violence suspect, something along those lines. I'm in favor of those types of things. Certainly the legislators don't have the guts to do it, so I'm in support of this initiative that's coming up that they've been talking about, as long as it is relatively limited and doesn't polarize everybody. And I haven't read it yet.
I'm sorry?
And I haven't read it yet, but I'm in favor of it as long as it's not too polarizing. As long as it addresses background checks, I'm all for it.
What would make it polarizing?
I think if they try to go too far, and I think if they throw in assault rifles or registration, something along those lines, I think that's going to kill it, quite frankly. I think the NRA is going to come out with all kinds of money against it, and I don't want that to happen.
Additional questions? I was wondering if you could, sort of a systems reform nerd, I was wondering if you could go into some detail about just sort of internally, whether it's management or whatever, what sort of, cultural or systems or management changes that you may have been able to make in the first 3 or 4 months?
I move some people around. I look at myself, I got this out of a book, I didn't think this up. I'm the bus driver, and I've got to have the right people on the bus, but as important as that is, I've got to have them in the right seats. And so the first thing that I did was I brought in a new undersheriff. Her name is Ann Kirkpatrick. She has been a police chief for 15 years. She's been the police chief of Ellensburg, Federal Way, most recently Spokane. She was the chief there for 5 years. And quite frankly, she has a lot more police chief experience than I do. So that's very helpful to me. And she's a woman. I wanted to diversify my upper command staff as much as I could. So I'm very happy with that. I changed my internal investigations captain out. I wanted somebody that had a little bit more confidence in internal investigations, because that's such a key unit. We changed the way that we investigate low levels of low-level complaints against deputies, because I wanted to have their confidence in the process that was fair, that was expedient, and would treat them the way they needed to be treated, because that's the only way you can have a good process, is the people have to accept it.
Thank you. Please.
You mentioned a few minutes ago that in essence you would tailor your program with respect to firearms to the potential objections of the NRA. I mean, isn't the record fairly clear that they are going to mount the most vehement possible fire-breathing objection that they can, no matter what, and therefore doesn't it make sense to take on the question of AR-15 type assault weapons straight on?
Well, I think you're probably right, Clayton, from the standpoint that the NRA is going to come out guns blazing. That's horrible. I'm also pretty pragmatic. And I really think if it's tailored correctly, I think we have a better chance. If we try to, with this initiative in particular, if we try to throw everything in with the kitchen sink, I don't think we have much of a chance of getting it to pass, quite frankly. I'm not sure that 51% of the public is ready for that. I think 80-some in this state, 85, 87% are ready for background checks, official background checks. And I think that's a start. If we can do that, I'm content to do that for now. Again, there's other things that can be done at the federal level. Wayne LaPierre 10 years ago was in favor of background checks. All of a sudden, he isn't anymore.
Yeah.
So I'll start small, quite frankly, because otherwise.